It's lights out and away we go.
Hello everybody, welcome to Unqualified. My name is Celeste.
My name's Chris.
And we're here, we're doing it. We're just gonna be completely honest. What day of the week? It's Tuesday, 2 weeks after the Spanish Grand Prix. Hi, just me editing this. I hate that I said Grand Prix. Grand Prix, maybe? I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm from California. A couple days after the Indy 500, like all things in 2020, nothing can be accounted for. We had a plan and then things happened, and so basically the Spanish Grand Prix was not too exciting. Forgettable too. And the Indy 500 was more exciting. So we're just going to squish them together and have a good time. Because we're unqualified. It doesn't matter. We're not following any rules. Let's talk about Spain, shall we? Anything you want to preface?
I just feel like the track there, it's a good track for testing, but not a good track for racing.
Mm-hmm.
Too hard to overtake.
Yeah, we saw a lot of that. I don't know. Personally, okay, you know my rule. Here's my philosophy. Two things make a race exciting. Three things make a race exciting. Overtaking, if there's lots of overtaking, if there is a safety car, and if it rains, or if there's any weather changes. Spain had nothing. I have a little poem for you, okay?
Really?
Yeah. The rain in Spain, it never came, and so I'm in pain. Thank you. Okay. I do go to school in Portland, so.
Yeah.
There was some tire drama.
You know what else we could say?
What?
Lewis might be a little bit vain.
Oh! Holla. There was some tire drama, as this whole season seems to entail. I would say, did they adjust the tire pressure?
Yeah, so by adding tire pressure, it makes the tires more durable because they don't flex as much under all the loads. But they also lose traction over their lifetime quicker too.
Well, let me ask you a question that I just thought of, just off of the top of my brain. That's what being a college student does. You just have to
expand your horizons.
Ugh. Do you think that because there was all that drama with the tires in the previous races, Lewis winning with his little big blister, that's a little bit of an oxymoron. Yeah. Lewis winning with a blister and all of that, do you think that maybe paranoia, maybe trauma, if you will call it that, affected the way that the drivers treated their tires?
Maybe somewhat, because they were looking at reducing tire degradation to try and get their strategy. Some wanted to go to a two-stop.
Mm-hmm.
There's always that one-stop, two-stop, three-stop.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the reason why I ask is because we were talking about, well, let's tie this all together. We were talking about a couple weeks ago, Max is great at advocating for himself. Okay? But what is advocating and what is complaining to your team about something that you don't find ideal? Because obviously what we're talking about is, I'm going to try to find an audio clip.
I don't care, just tires, there's nothing left. You want me to repeat it again? This tire is dead.
Max was complaining on the radio a lot this race about his tires weren't feeling well, and he was complaining to his engineer a lot. He was being kind of rude, and maybe I'm sensitive, but maybe you should be nice to your engineer. We aren't all named Lewis Hamilton. So what?
Yes, well, but the difference being is, even if he was complaining, he was still pushing.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
He still finished second and split the Mercedes.
Which is always a win in our book.
Yes, and, results is what counts.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, how much different is that than Kimi telling his engineer, what?
I
know what I'm doing. Or, yes, I know.
That's a good point. I think that maybe it's just because I was raised in a way, thanks to you, where you're like nice to people who are doing things for you. And so maybe I just expect, because Max is closer to my age than your age, I was just expecting him to be a little bit more respectful. But you know what? High tension. Who am I? I've never been in a Formula One car. I've never driven past 82 miles per hour. Thank you very much. And so, who am I to tell about the tension? Who am I? Speaking of tension, let's talk about Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton has been in headlines recently. What headlines, you may ask? Let me tell you. Formula1.com. You know why? Because that's the only publication I read. And when I tell you...
I'm determined to widen your horizons on that, college student.
You and 6 other college professors, so maybe we'll take baby steps, okay?
I must tell... Years ago, I worked in a shop that worked on sports cars and stuff, and my boss, an ex-racer himself, had a bunch of Auto Week magazines that he kept upstairs in the loft, and I would go up there sometimes on my break and look at old Auto Week magazines. Auto Week is a great source of up-to-date information. Now, of course, you don't have to buy the magazine. You just go on.
Okay, let's make a little deal. Something's got to be in it for me, but I will do this for you. Next week, I will read a whole Auto Week article for our next race, and I will summarize it. What are you going to give me?
Chocolate.
Oh, okay. I'll work for that.
Okay.
That's coming
Moving
soon.
right along. Do we really spend much time on Lewis?
Oh, yes, we do have to spend much time on Lewis. Where I was going with this before we went on a little spin-off and we made a little promise is there was a headline by F1.com of Lewis saying, and I quote, "I'd trade my 7th world title for greater diversity in Formula One." Okay, Lewis, here we are. Life lessons with Lewis. Life lessons by Lewis. If you want something done, do it yourself. We all know how much money you have, okay? So really, seriously, why don't you create a program? Why don't you work with the engineers to create a program? It kind of reminds me of when politicians are like, we need somebody to work on this. Dude, you're the politician. That's literally your job. Hello. Anyways, or billionaires, when billionaires are like, we need to allocate some money to go to climate change. Do it, Jeff Bezos. Anyways, that's your life lesson. Speaking of money, we're gonna go jump right into our next segment. Time for Tech Talk with Chris.
Okay.
Here's my question of the week. Formula One is all about money, and we're gonna talk about penalties later. But sometimes when a team is given a penalty, they're given a big fine. It can be a huge fine. Where does the money go, and who benefits from the money?
Well, the money goes back to the FIA, goes into their bank account so they can continue to pay out money. Teams get money in the Constructors' Championship.
Uh-huh.
They have to keep that circle going.
Like a cycle.
It is.
Well, so then why doesn't that money go towards creating more programs for diversity and inclusion? I'm talking like a scholarship. Formula One, you can always talk to me, a knowledgeable college student. Make a scholarship for kids who are in communities that don't have a lot of money, kids that, go-karting. Lewis can be in charge of it. He's obviously an expert in this.
So you're thinking of a scholarship towards racing career.
Yeah. Well,
a scholarship could also be towards engineering with a focus on motorsports.
Or PR. In fact, Formula One, if you're watching this, my university is so expensive, and so if you just want to sprinkle a little bit of money in my bank account to pay for the rest of my degree, we gladly appreciate it. I'll pay you back when I'm working for you. And then you'll be paying me. It'll be a cycle. You love cycles.
You gotta keep that money. Cash flow is what it's all about.
Yeah, it's true. Speaking of cash flow,
Oh, I just was thinking it was interesting that right around this time in September, we're almost in September, in 2007,
How old was I? 5.
the largest fine ever given by the FIA to our friends at McLaren
No way.
and Mr. Ron Dennis, who used to be in charge. There was a little behind the scenes there because Ron Dennis and Max Mosley, who was running the FIA, probably weren't the best of friends.
Oh.
So when he had the opportunity to nail him, he made it big. Now, so $100 million sounds like a lot of money,
$100 million.
but I do have this quote that Ron Dennis admitted to. We have a turnover of 450 million to 500 million a year, and we are debt free. This is a very strong company.
McLaren wishes they had that money now.
Yeah, things are not probably looking so hot right now. Well, and if you think about it, 2007, 2008, the economy of the world was affected. So
Thanks to us. Sorry about that.
2007, yes, was probably sort of one of the peaks of cash flow. Interestingly enough, the reason that they were fined was not so much that they started something. They were just involved. And it started from our friends in Italy, Ferrari.
Is this a mafia story?
No, you shouldn't connect the mafia with
Sorry.
illegal activity
Call me out.
necessarily. I mean, imagine that. But there was a mechanic who was trying to rise through the Ferrari organization.
Uh-huh.
And there was another guy that worked with him. And the two of them were not really happy with Ferrari. And Ferrari doesn't like it if you publicly say, I'm not happy with Ferrari.
Wait,
It's
but that's
kinda
what's
like
happening
saying-
now.
Kind of like saying, I'm not happy with the Vatican.
Oh.
Ferrari in Italy, like they're right there with the Vatican. So, what happened?
What happened? I'm on the edge of my
These
seat.
two guys copied, and the number that I saw was 780 pages.
Oh, like hand copied it?
No,
Oh.
they had copy machines. It wasn't in ancient history. But they didn't have Apple iPhones. So they copied, I think it was 270 pages. And between the two of them, kind of talked about, well, we're going to be out of here anyway, so we're going to take this information with us. It uses it kind of leverage to go to your next job, right?
Oh, you have inside knowledge.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if they admitted in their job interview that they had this inside knowledge, but they figured it would, sooner or later, they were going to use it.
Mm.
So this one guy, we think his name was pronounced Coughlin, had worked at Ferrari with the other guy, Stepney. Coughlin ended up working for McLaren.
Mm.
His first mistake was he had his wife go into a copy shop in the old days, 2000, early 2000s. They still had buildings where you would go in and they'd have all these copy machines, and either you would pay a certain amount per copy to make a copy, or you would say, here's 700 and something pages, can you make a copy of it? Or in this case, they asked him, can you scan these and put them on CDs for us?
Mm.
The person behind the desk, I don't know who this person was, male or female. One place I read it was a female, one place I read it was a male, was an F1 Ferrari fan. Picked up the phone the next morning and said, I had this interaction with a Mrs. Coughlin, and you might be interested in what she had me copy.
You know what they say. Forza Ferrari.
Yes. So only in Europe would this happen. I mean, really, in America, I don't know how many F1 fans work at copy shops or coffee shops for that matter. But anyway, so to make the longest story short, this drama got revealed. The FIA was involved with McLaren. McLaren was saying, even if they had this stuff, we never used it. Like, we didn't do anything wrong. Just because they had this stuff, we didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, I totally see that.
So, but in any case, they were found guilty, went through a trial. It wasn't just like they shook his finger at him and said, you're bad. No, they were found guilty. The guys were fired, of course. And they did kind of work it out where they lost all their constructor points for the year.
Mm-hmm.
So they took the money that they lost by having those constructor points. Those were cut off the 100 million. So it gave them a little discount there.
Yeah.
They allowed Alonso to continue to get his points. And now I'm forgetting the other driver. These guys were all in possible contention for the championship. They had 4 races left at this point.
Back
It
when
was
racing
September.
was not
right?
Mercedes every year.
So it was
no shade, but
Oh yeah, so it was Alonso and Lewis and Raikkonen. They were all possibly mathematically they could have won.
right.
So they allowed Alonso and Hamilton
To
to
their
keep
points.
their points. They told McLaren, none of you can go on the podium if you win the top 3 for the rest of the year.
Aw.
Like the constructor guy that usually they send up
but
an
the
engineer.
driver could
the
go.
driver could
okay,
go.
I
up,
was
but,
like, that's not fair.
but nobody from the McLaren organization could go. They also cut the drivers slack because the drivers cooperated and shared some emails and texts that talked about how, in other words, they used evidence from the drivers directly. So for their good behavior, they didn't punish them.
Oh, right on.
But let's face it wasn't just about that. They knew that the fans would have been upset if you punished some of the leading drivers for something that they really didn't have control over. So it was a big deal, and I had kind of forgotten the details until I kind of went back and went, oh yeah, there was a big fine
And
back then.
Repeat that number again.
$100 million.
Oh my god, that could save.
Yes. So, I
Save
mean,
a lot
but
of
really,
lives.
this whole sport is run with obscene amounts of cash.
It's true.
So,
I'm just saying, a small sliver of that could go to my education. If anybody's watching, Bernie.
okay. So, with the 4 races left, one of my favorite drivers of all time, Kimi, won Belgium in September.
Uh-huh.
Lewis won Japan in September. Kimi won China in October.
Uh-huh.
And then the final race of the season, the points were very close. If Hamilton had won, he would have walked away with the championship. There was no mathematical way.
Right.
But he had to finish 5th or better, and Kimi had to be behind him pretty much.
Uh-huh.
And that did not happen. In fact, pretty much the opposite happened. This was a day that Lewis had a very, very bad day. Lewis had a bad start. Lewis went off on the first lap, locked up one of his front wheels and slid off the track and had to rejoin, lost several more places. Lewis did not finish well in that race. I think he finished 8th or 9th. And Kimi finished 1st in that race.
And won the championship.
Won the championship for who?
Forza Ferrari. Right
Who
on.
had been wronged in this case.
Poetic justice.
Yes, and Kimi also got fastest lap. His fastest lap gave him an extra point, right?
Right?
I think, if memory's not wrong, that he won the championship by 1 or 2 points. It was very close.
Wow.
So,
Right on. This was a good year to be a Ferrari fan.
Yeah, well,
Unlike now.
Yeah, it was a good year to be
I think-
Kimi.
That's a really good example of the FIA or race stewards separating the team from the driver and making it very clear that the drivers oftentimes aren't involved with the politics and aren't involved with, I mean, they're very involved, but
some decisions are made beyond their control.
yeah.
You know what also is an example of?
What?
Karma.
Good dad joke. Good dad
Yeah,
joke.
Yes.
Well, that was a good one. I don't know how I'm going to top you with the rest of my segments because you kind of knocked it out of the park. But,
Well, it does go to show that in the old days, when you were a small child,
Mhm.
there was some pretty good competition going on. Excluding the days when Michael Schumacher used to walk away with a lot of the races, even back then there was drama.
yeah.
Now it's a little bit more predictable.
Well, it was easier to like Lewis back then, I think.
Well, it was easier to like Michael too.
The thing is, here's the thing. Lewis Hamilton, if you're watching this, I'd like to address you directly in this moment. I'm sorry, it's just that nobody likes the main character after the main character wins. Freaking I'm a huge Harry Potter fan. I hate Harry Potter as a character. Also, that whole series has become problematic in these recent years. But I just don't like Harry Potter, and it's because there's too much main character syndrome, where there's too many good things happen, and then there's drama, and it's like, oh, I deserve this because I'm the main character. Lewis, you're done we're ending the series, okay? See ya. It's time for the sequel. Who will it be? Perhaps Max? I don't know. Guess what's next weekend? Spa. Who's your take?
Well, I think Max does really well, but if you think back to about a year ago, a sad weekend.
Yeah.
But an emotional weekend for Charles because he won.
Yep.
And he dedicated the race to his friend. So
he's fast there.
He is fast there.
Charles is a perfect example of poetic justice.
And I drove the sim on that track today.
Weird flex, but okay.
And that one's a tough one to get.
Yeah.
There is some extremely high speed. Eau Rouge, 5th gear is amazing. But there are a lot of places where you really need to have control of your car to get it down to the speed to make it through the tight stuff and get out and exit and get a good launch onto the next straight.
Yeah.
So a lot of skills involved there.
I have mixed feelings about Spa. I think because of what happened last year. First of all, just when I got that notification that there was that accident at all, I was painting my parking spot at school, and I remember reading it, and it was shocking for me because I wasn't alive when, even when Jules passed away, I wasn't paying attention to racing at that time, and so this was the first big crash that I was just it hit me, and I had to sit down because I was like, oh my god, I forget that people really don't make it out of this sport. So Spa is I think will always be affiliated with that, but also I like Spa because it's you're not just looking at something flat. There's lots of texture, there's some spice, so it's more fun to watch. So I'm looking forward to Spa, and I did hear a little rumor that there would be rain.
Maybe.
Who can predict that? We need rain more than anybody at this point. We're gonna kind of cut it short with Formula One. Did you know that Renault dropped their protest?
I saw that today, yes.
I think it's because, listen, I'll talk about this in a little while. You spoke that into the universe. You said, leave the drama in the past. And that's exactly what Renault said too. Good for you.
Well, another situation where they may be worried about their karma.
Well, that's true. Renault's having a tough year. Tough couple of years. Obviously today is Tuesday and Turkey was added to the calendar. So now there's, I think, 17 races in the calendar. It's exciting, but I will say this, and maybe we'll dive into this in another episode. It feels a little wrong to me that you're going to have a whole campaign dedicated to ending racism, but then you are benefiting off of countries that participate in racism. China's a good example with, there's Muslims in concentration camps, but every time you race there, you're bringing money into their country and you're benefiting from that racism. I understand that every country has things that there's not, we live in the United States, okay? I understand that every country is not great. Every country has things that they could be better on, but if you're going to have a whole campaign about racism and then race in countries where there are groups that are seriously, seriously disadvantaged, maybe I would think about that.
Again, remember, it's a business. It's all about the dollar signs.
Yeah, so is my college education. This is once again a plea. If you want to... let's move to Indy. Indy 500 was this weekend. It was a race full of excitement. A long time coming, I think. The Indy 500, as an American, is something you watch every year, and I think that's the one time I feel pride for this country, that and the Olympics, because it's very, American, there's lots of good stories, but this year there was some controversy. We will touch on that. What does the Indy 500 mean to you?
Well, when I was much younger, and I used to watch racing on TV, I might have mentioned to you before, it was called ABC Wide World of Sports.
Yeah, I have
ABC was big in the motor racing world, hitting all the main events.
Mm-hmm.
Monaco was on ABC, just like Indy was.
Right.
Some NASCAR, not all the NASCAR. It wasn't like NASCAR every
NASCAR
weekend.
Century.
Yeah. But so anyway, so Indy 500 was something that me and some of my friends were like, you got to watch the Indy 500.
Yeah.
And back then it was even scarier. The safety, the barriers, it was not a good thing. And there were crashes involving balls of fire and cars upside down. So as a kid, you know, there's a little bit of like, oh my God, did you see that?
Mm-hmm.
But also there was a lot of innovation.
Mm-hmm.
Indianapolis, the rules have tightened 100% since then.
Right.
But, you know, when Indy started with some front wheel drive cars even, but front engine cars, open cockpits, riding mechanics to pump the oil, like to keep the car going. I mean, the beginnings of Indy was the development of motorsport. So just the history of developing cars that can go 500 miles fast to cars that can consistently go within a few seconds of their qualifying lap time for 500 miles.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of, you know, it's the classic American know-how. Yeah, there were foreign cars there, and the first rear engine car was built by a British Colin Chapman Lotus, but still, I'm saying there was a lot of American ingenuity and development in Indy. So
yeah. So USA. I also, the Indy 500 is special to me just because I never was I knew what the Indy 500 was. Sometimes I would watch it if it was on TV, but I was never invested until last year, and it was right after Monaco because they're usually always on the same weekend besides this year of craziness. But I was like upset about something that had happened in Monaco. Probably Charles
did crash out of Monaco last year.
I don't know. That's probably what it was related to. Yeah. And then the Indy 500 was on a few hours after, and we switched it on. And that was the first Indy 500 I had paid attention to. And luckily, it was there was controversy, but it was exciting down to the last lap because of Simon Pagenaud and Alexander Rossi, who we'll talk about in a bit. But yeah, I don't know. It was just one of those things where I watched it and I was like, hey, I love Formula One. I love open-wheeled racing, and this is something that's literally happening, you know, in my country. Something that's accessible. The first open-wheel racing, I went to Laguna Seca, which was still probably the best day of my life up until this moment. I chose my college. The university I go to is by a racetrack, which is part of the reason I chose it. So, yeah, I would say watching IndyCar is what made me realize that I want to work in racing. So it's very special, obviously. We're an IndyCar family. Something that I thought was cool, I guess usually Dale Earnhardt Jr. commentates on the Indy 500. I think that they were talking about that. I could be completely wrong. But he was doing something with NASCAR because there was a NASCAR doubleheader. So he was out of the state. But, so they had Danica Patrick instead. We all know I am a big fan of women in motorsport. But I did some research about Danica Patrick. She is so rad. She is so cool. We're going to call this Wikipedia watch. All of my source on this is Wikipedia. I love Wikipedia. I have nothing bad to say. Danica Patrick is... Are you ready for this, first of all?
Yeah, I'd love to know more about Danica.
Okay. Danica Patrick is the most successful woman in open-wheeled racing. And think about how long open-wheeled racing's been around. Pretty cool. So, she's from, I think, Ohio. What happens in Ohio? I don't know.
Go fast, turn left.
I suppose. Mid-Ohio isn't Ohio.
Well,
she's
no,
from...
But the Midwest, it's like little dirt tracks, people, backyard, grassroots motorsports, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of grassroots, she came from a middle-class family, which is very much us. She started in karting with her parents' permission. She was really good at it. She dropped out of high school in order to go to Europe. She raced formula cars, low level. Let's talk about some accomplishments, shall we? She is the only woman to win an IndyCar race. IndyCar used to race in Japan, I guess, and she won that race. I couldn't tell you the year because I'm unqualified and I didn't write that The most laps led by a woman in IndyCar in general and in the Indy 500 were by Danica Patrick. She also was in NASCAR. She had the most top 10 finishes, the most laps led, and the first woman to get pole position, NASCAR Cup Series. And she had the highest finish in not only the Indy 500, I think she finished 3rd or 4th, but also in...
I think it was 4th.
It was 4th. But also, in the Daytona 500. So yeah, lots of ums in that. Maybe that'll be a fun counter. Taking public speaking, it's gonna get better.
Okay.
But the reason why I really like Danica, because obviously she's qualified to talk about that, but she was also, like, so calm and collected, and everything she had to say was so insightful, I found. I love watching IndyCar because I think that those commentators really know what they're doing. They're all former racers. So that's good. But those men, they tend to get excited, which I really like. But I thought it was a good it was a good match. Something that Danica did, and I'm not a fan of this in general, but commentators love making their pick, especially before the Indy 500. And in my opinion, I freaking hate it when they do that. I hate it. I think there is such thing as the commentator's curse, especially in Formula One with Daniel Ricciardo. But Danica picked Alexander Rossi to win. Whenever you do that, it just doesn't turn out well. I think as a viewer, it's so much more exciting when you see, like, the underdog come out, somebody who's not expected to win.
Yeah.
Which is what happened this year. I can't complain.
Yeah.
But we do have to talk about Alexander Rossi because we do have some bias. Alexander Rossi is my favorite IndyCar driver. Who's your favorite IndyCar driver?
Well, he's all right, but I really respect Marcus Ericsson because he came over from F1 and he's kind of slid right in and done well. Variety of courses. He is a well-spoken guy. He
speaks good English. We talked to him once.
Yeah, and it's kind of like he just lets everything roll off him too. Like,
yeah.
It doesn't, he hit the wall and he's obviously disappointed, but it wasn't like he was trying to come up with excuses. He pretty much admitted, like, I lost it.
He's a good sport.
Yeah.
I noticed when we went to Laguna Seca this last year, and it was the last race of the season, so there were all kinds of emotions attached to that. Marcus did pretty well, but then we were like walking by and he was talking to fans and we stopped and he was like, hey, do you want an autograph? Like, we didn't even ask. He was like, I'll be right back. And then he went, he signed it twice. He signed mine twice. Once in black and once in gold. I still have it. I love it so much. But yeah, I don't know. Just, like, I really love it when drivers make an effort to connect with their fans, and that was really cool. We had a conversation with him, and yeah. But alas, my favorite driver is Alexander Rossi, and let me tell you why. Hey, me editing again. I realized that during this part, I'm, like, really talking with a lot of authority as if I did a lot of research into Alexander Rossi's life. And while that might have happened, like, a year ago or so, this is, like, not something that I'm, like, qualified to talk about. So if Alexander Rossi is, like, watching this, first of all, hey. Second of all, the only way to correct the information in this episode is simply to come on the podcast. So, your move, the ball's in your court. If it's wrong, that's the only. Alexander Rossi is from a small town called Nevada City, California. It's about an hour away from us. We're in the same county. Holla. We share a library. What? But yeah, to me, Alexander Rossi is like the blueprint of who I want to be. He's this kid. He grew up waking up at 4 a.m., 6 a.m. to watch Formula One races. Very much what I do every single week, it's fine. I was sad that they weren't racing in the United States because that's the one race that I get to sleep in for, but it's fine. And then he actually finished his degree, which was education's always been important to us, so I like that. And then he went to, not his degree, he got a diploma from high school. And then he started racing in Europe. He worked through Formula. He worked in Formula One. He raced in Formula One. He did 6 starts or 4 starts. Obviously, it wasn't really his thing. I think there was a lot of criticism because America, the home of the whatever. But then he went back to the United States in his rookie year in IndyCar, 2016. He won the Indy 500, the 100th running of the Indy 500. And ever since then, that's kind of been his track. He's always kind of done really well there. And so that's why a lot of drivers, previous or current, pick him to win. But Alex is having a no good year so far. Not the best luck. He's been having lots of car issues. And then he didn't qualify great for this, but he was running pretty well. He was running in 3rd for most of the race, and then at one point he was chasing back and forth with Scott Dixon.
Swapping the lead.
Yeah, we can talk about that in a minute. And then, I don't know. So, here's what happened with Alexander Rossi. Let's have a little chat, a little digest. I was very passionate about this for a couple of days. I've calmed down. I can speak about it with respect to everybody. But, like I said, it was like a weird race. There was, well, let's talk about the heat. Alex's communication booth overheated. How hot do you think it was in Indy this weekend?
Probably in the 90s, mid-90s.
Just so you know, I did look it up. In Spain, they were complaining about how hot it was. It was 82 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay? Come on. Grow up. It's 82 degrees in this room right now. Maybe not, but whatever. So his communication booth overheated, and then they couldn't talk to him. They had to restart it, reboot it. So he missed his first pit stop, which is huge in the Indy 500 if you don't know. It's like really big. All those pit stops are calculated. You never know what's going to happen, so you want to stick to your strategy until there's a safety car or whatever. So he missed that. He made up some time when there was a crash. And then he was, once again, running in 3rd. He came in for a pit stop. There's 2 lanes when you come out of the Indy 500 track, the oval track, I guess in the street, whatever. There's a slow lane and a fast lane, similar to the highway. He was pulling into the slow lane, as you do. And Takuma Sato was coming out of his pit box. Takuma was not in a lane. He was in the middle of 2 lanes. I watched it my very own self. And Alex hit him. There was no damage. There was a little wiggle. But overall, nothing really.
Yeah, and I think if you watched it, Takuma's front wheel hit Alex's back wheel, right?
I'll put a little clip in.
Okay, well, if you think about that, if that happens on the road, that means the person behind failed to slow for the person in front. Now, if that happened on our street and someone was pulling out of a driveway, you might say, well, they failed to yield to the traffic. But my point is it wasn't like Alex took the front of his car and hit Takuma squarely. No, it was almost like they just kind of rubbed because they're both trying to. So there's a few
issues that I have with this. Number 1, the driver, Alexander Rossi, he's driving his car. He can't see what's going on in the pit lane. That's completely on his engineers. Okay, so that's one thing. Say you want to put all of the blame on his team. That's one thing. But another thing was, Takuma Sato was not in a lane. He was in the middle of 2 lanes. He could have been over. And so I don't really see how that's completely Alexander's fault. And Pato O'Ward was in that mix somehow got out unscathed, which is great. I'm a McLaren fan. But then the result of all of this happening was that Alex, who was running in the front, got dropped to go be in the back, which then led him to freak out, deservingly, in my opinion. And he did make a cool dash. He passed like 4 or 5 cars, which was a good clip. I'll put that in. But then, I don't know if it was panic, something got loose, he hit the wall and had to retire from the race.
Yeah, what I saw was that he understeered into the wall. So he was probably up in the gray trying to get around people or trying to go a little bit faster.
Yeah. And to me, that's the thing about the Indy 500. If you don't know, once again, if you're a Formula One fan and you've never seen the Indy 500, they have 2 weeks of practice. I mean, it's a huge deal. That's why Fernando Alonso, who hasn't driven ovals before driving in the Indy 500, that's why drivers like that can do well there, which he did okay, because they have 2 weeks of practice. But then in the race, weird things happen like that, and it doesn't matter how well you know the track. Alexander knows that track probably like the back of his hand, but you can get loose and you can hit the wall, which didn't just happen to Alexander Rossi. It happened several times.
It happened to Marcus.
It happened to Marcus. It happened with Alex Palou, who qualified excellently. I don't know. I just think IndyCar doesn't have penalties in the way that the FIA does, where the team just gets fined or the team just gets...
Yeah, but they did have the option. They didn't have to put him to the back.
Yeah.
They could have put him behind Sato.
Yeah. That, in fact,
they
that
could
to
have
me would
given
be
him
more
a
fair.
stop and go.
Yep. Because Rinus VeeKay, who maybe you guys know him because he is from Europe and he did race in the low-level formulas, I think. He's a rookie. He's 19. Hey! He hit one of his engineers in the pit lane and he got a stop and go. And ultimately it didn't ruin his race. I just personally, I think that whole penalty was not deserving at all. Especially when it's not. Why punish the driver when it's not the driver's fault?
Yeah. And I would say, I mean, I'm not an authority on NASCAR, but I would say if it was NASCAR, they probably wouldn't have punished him.
Because what do they say in NASCAR?
Rubbing his racing.
I love saying that for no reason.
Or if they had punished him, it would definitely have not have been that severe.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that, to me, I usually really commend IndyCar because I love how fair it is and I love how, almost everything is fair in IndyCar. There's similar budgets, similar cars, similar engine,
Yeah.
motors. Everything is more fair than Formula One. You don't have Mercedes or the equivalent of Mercedes. There isn't an equivalent of Mercedes because anybody could win an IndyCar race. And this year we've had 4 different winners. So, I don't know. I usually commend them for being fair, but in this race specifically, it almost felt like they made the FIA look good, which is saying a lot for me. But yeah, speaking of crashes, there was a lot of weird ones. And sort of what I talked about. But, who was that? Davidson?
Hi, me again, editing. I just realized his name is James Davison. There's no D. Can you see it? Anyways, I hate it when people get my name wrong, so I don't want to. Anyways.
Who was not an IndyCar driver, driving for a team that's not an IndyCar team. He had some mechanical failure. His wheel caught on fire.
Yeah, I think it was his brake failed.
Yeah.
And because the wheels are magnesium, if you get them hot enough, they're metal, but they burn.
That was the first big one that people were like, huh? That was the first or second lap, almost.
It was pretty early, yeah.
Obviously racing for Rick Ware Racing. If you don't know Rick Ware Racing, it's because maybe you watch NASCAR and they're always the worst team. No offense, guys. But I think, well, I'll ask your opinion on this. What do you think about teams that have cars in several different disciplines of racing? Because Rick Ware, just for context, has a car in NASCAR Cup. They have 2 or 3. IndyCar, this was their first race with just Rick Ware, and obviously in partnership with other people. That's a big thing in IndyCar. IMSA, I think they're getting a car, and then the Asian Le Mans, which is where they've really been successful. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I have to say Rick Ware is not always the last people in NASCAR. He doesn't always have the bottom.
It's because in NASCAR they crash, so they always start better than they qualified, or finish better than they qualified.
So anyway, I do feel like you should find what you do the best and put your resources that direction.
I agree.
But on the other hand, if you're a multi-million-dollar organization like McLaren, and you have the technical ability to excel in more than one series, that's something.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, if you're going to do it, you need to be prepared to go to that level.
I don't know. I just know IndyCar is, the Indy 500 in specifically, is such a huge thing where it takes a lot just to qualify. So first of all, good for Davidson for even qualifying. That's bigger than Alonso got further than Alonso got last year, and he's obviously one of the greats. But it's expensive to race in the Indy 500, and if you're like a team like Rick Ware, where you're not a high budget team, you're not Andretti Autosport, you're not Team Penske, why would you not just throw all of your resources into somewhere where you can get to be that? Because in the Asian Le Mans series, they were doing, I think they won the championship in LMP2. So to me, it just seems like, why would you not throw your resources into that? But I can totally see the other side, because McLaren, who partners with Arrow in IndyCar, they've had an amazing rookie season with 2 young drivers who, I mean, once again, I don't know, I have bias, I'm a McLaren fan.
Yeah.
But just in the Indy 500, Pato O'Ward, who's their a McLaren driver, he was the rookie of the Indy 500. He finished in 6th.
Just to clarify, this is not Pato O'Ward's first season in IndyCar, because last year he had he raced some races, which if you're not familiar, you can totally do that in IndyCar. It's like some cars race some races, some drivers race. Anyways, he wasn't on for the full season, but this is his first season in IndyCar where he was signed he raced every race. Still is.
After doing great, he was consistent. I think Oliver Askew would have probably done the same thing, but he unfortunately crashed out. I don't know. Should we talk about the real controversy?
Oh, the finish?
Yeah. I'll just give a little context, right?
Mm-hmm.
In IndyCar, there's an option to have a yellow flag. There's no blue flags, but there's yellow flags, green flags, checkered flags, and red flags. So they can actually stop the race and restart. And in a lot of cases, if it's close to the end, they'll do a 3-lap shootout where IndyCar does a rolling start, by the way. So it's not as dangerous as Formula 1. They probably couldn't do that. But they always have the option to do that. And so the last lap of this year's Indy 500, it was Takuma Sato and Scott Dixon and Graham Rahal, all there in the top 3, switching. It was good racing, and to me, it was really exciting. It was an exciting end to an exciting race. And then Spencer Pigot, who is really I think he's going to go far, unfortunately had a humongous crash. I mean, there was lots of damage not only to his car, I mean, it was ricocheting. I'm not going to put in the video because I find it disrespectful, so if you want to find that, you can.
Okay, last time I'll do this. But I just wanted to clarify again, the reason why there's no pictures of crashes, I was talking about earlier, how lots of weird things happened and cars got loose and hit the wall and had to retire. I didn't put in any pictures of crashes just because I think it's first of all, I don't like to look at it because I think that it's a little disturbing. But second of all, if I was a driver and I had crashed out, I would never want to see that crash over and over again. So I left them all out. If you want to look it up, you can look it up. It's easy to access.
There was a lot of damage. There was a yellow flag. He was helped out of the car, and then I guess he passed out. He was laying on the tarmac at one point while these cars were weaving through because it was a yellow flag. Everybody thought that it was going to go to a red flag, and unfortunately, say what you will, it ended under a yellow flag. Takuma Sato just, in my opinion, was given the win. I wouldn't say undeservingly. He definitely raced for it, but I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I mean, part of it is that some people felt like Sato wouldn't have had the fuel to finish if they hadn't finished under yellow. He would have had to pit.
Well, I think...
Or he would have run out of fuel in the last, quarter mile and have to coast over the finish line, and he wouldn't have won then.
For me, okay, in my opinion, this is another thing I was really fired up about, and I've had some time to calm down, and I've had some time to make a mature statement. For me, it was an exciting race, and I really enjoyed it until they didn't make the call to go to red, because I think that just from a viewership standpoint, this race specifically was hyped up to be so huge. I mean, Formula 1 fans were watching it, especially McLaren fans, because the McLaren, Carlos and Lando hyped it up. Their whole team hyped it up. Zach Brown flew out. So they had a bunch of viewers that weren't just IndyCar fans. They had a NASCAR doubleheader, so a lot of NASCAR. So many people were watching this race. And they also, there's a big criticism that NBC puts in way too many commercials, which I totally agree with. There's so many commercials put on IndyCar, and sometimes you miss the action because there's a commercial and they'll hop back to it, but it's just not the same as watching Formula One. NBC had the chance to have a very exciting race, not just for the fans, but also the drivers, and they had the chance to make more money. If they would have put a red flag, just to make sure Spencer Pigot was off of the track at least. Maybe they didn't fix the damage to the track, then, you know, I think that they could have had that 3-lap shootout. It would have made everything more exciting. They could have put in another commercial break. They could have made some money. But, you know, they chose to end it under yellow. It's been criticized. A lot of the drivers have come back and said, you know, it was the right call. Personally, just from a safety point of view, IndyCar is amazing safety for everything. They have an aero screen, if you don't know, and that's saved drivers' lives already. And just all of the crashes in the Indy 500 this year were scary, and drivers could have died. But once again, I think from a viewership point of view, when you see Spencer Pigot laying on the ground and then the ambulance has to come out and they're putting him on a stretcher and he's passed out on the ground, to me, that was, like, scary. And to see the cars weaving between the ambulance and the car, it was, like, it left kind of a bad taste in my mouth because it felt kind of almost disrespectful. And, you know, Spencer's come out and he's okay. He's cleared to race again. And he, you know, I don't know how, but he escaped with, like, very minimal injuries. But, you know, it kind of almost reminded me of Ryan Newman, who was driving in NASCAR and had a huge crash in the Daytona 500. And it was, like, it was really scary. I don't know. Big crashes get to me because I forget these people are human beings until something like that happens. It just, from a safety point of view, I would have preferred if they would have red flagged it and then gotten him off the track and then done a 3-lap shootout. I think overall it would have been better. But I understand the argument because the argument is like, oh, they only do that to fix track damage. Like, they only do red flags to fix track damages, and it would have taken a long time to fix the damage. But I don't know.
Yeah, and I think the other point is that it's a 500-mile race, and by stopping it and starting it, the cars would have actually traveled more than 500 miles.
That's a good point, too.
So, I don't know. But I agree. I think that they should have restarted it.
Yeah. And with all of this being said, here we have my Celeste's unqualified advice of the episode. Celeste's unqualified racing advice. Okay, this one goes out to IndyCar as a whole. I don't think they're a corporation. As an organization. Hey IndyCar, if you've got a driver injured, laying on the track, and you're like still racing, maybe like stop the race, you know? Just maybe make sure that guy or girl is okay. Get him off the track, and then start the race again. Cause it kinda, you know, just gave me a bad vibe, you know? The vibe was not it for me. So, please take me up on that next time.
Okay.
Yeah, all in all, Takuma Sato, he's a great guy. He's a great racer. He's really humble. One time, he smiled at me, so that was kind of fun. And, totally deserving. Good win for Japan, who, I don't know. Japan's a good country. So.
Well, they're also a major engine supplier. The Honda program has really been successful in IndyCar, so. Yeah,
totally deserving too. He's an amazing driver. Scott Dixon is also amazing, and I would have been equally happy if he would have gotten it, so. I don't know. Overall, I think I've come to peace with it, and I think the good outweighs the bad for me on the Indy 500 this year. Any takeaways?
Well, I'm just grateful that nobody was seriously injured that whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, incredible. I mean, I'm going to put a list of all of the people that were involved in crashes, but, like, even Oliver Askew was, like, I think another one that they got the ambulance out for. It's terrifying. I just am high anxiety anyways, but I think I forget that they're not superhumans driving at 275 miles per hour. It's just, and then something happens and you're like...
No, you need to fix that.
How fast do they go?
Maybe 220, 230.
Okay, yeah, he was right. The top speed at the Indy 500 is 239 miles per hour, set by Ari Lyondike. Okay, not The Bachelor, his dad.
My scale's a little off.
Oh, yeah,
82 miles per
just
hour.
fix that.
You have any highlights that anybody you were happy to see?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's really good for Scott Dixon to be able to have that many laps led.
Yeah, Scott
Yeah.
Dixon's having an amazing season. I think
Yeah.
he's a championship leader at this point. He's won 3 races in a row, which is a record for IndyCar, which is just, context for Formula One because that happens so often and nobody even cares. But yeah, he's just a good guy too. He's a good guy. I like him.
Yeah.
What about, you want to talk about Colton?
Well, Colton stayed out of trouble.
Yeah.
Think about that.
I think you should tell your Colton Herta story.
No, I think we should save that for another
Save it.
time.
Okay. We do have a good Colton Herta story. It's not as exciting, but Colton. Any other highlights?
Not really. Just really looking forward to Spa.
I would say my highlight was Pato Award. I think he's a good guy. He's a good racer. He's going to go really far. Mark my words. Today, August 25th, I said that. Someday when you're winning some races, championships, you're up there in the points, maybe you win the Indy 500, you can thank me, I'll leave my address in the comments. You can just send me a thank you note. I'll have it framed. We'll put it right here. This sombrero was for Spain, by the way. I forgot to mention that. It's very important to me. Very cool stuff.
Yeah.
Really very cool. Spa's coming up. We're going to talk about Spa. A little life update. I did start college and I'm taking full course load, which is good and bad. I'm learning a lot, but it's kind of scary to be back in school. So that's kind of what we're working with. We're just going to be flexible. This is UnqualiF1ed, so we're just going to live by our own rules.
Yeah.
See you in Spa.
All right. Forza Ferrari.